Hi, I'm Astrid Bin, and along with Laurel Pardue, we're going to present The Other Hegemony Effects of Software Development Culture on Music Software and What We Can Do About It. First, we'll identify this other hegemony. Then, we'll talk about how it biases electronic music software, the reasons these biases exist, how this bias impacts music making, and what we can do about it. It's doubtless that colonial legacies affect music software. There are many music traditions that simply aren't supported by contemporary music making software, and through a colonialist lens, we can see that there is a long standing power structure that values cultural outputs from people who are largely white and largely European. But the fact remains that many European traditions are not supported by DAWs either. In fact, it's easier to point to the very few musical styles that are supported rather than list the thousands that aren't. This suggests that colonialism isn't the only reason that music software supports limited styles, and another hegemony is at work. We propose that this other hegemony is software development culture. Though software development culture is certainly shaped by colonial history, its effects on music software are specific to its unique conventions and constraints. However, with a purely historical lens, this active and living hegemony is more latent and easy to miss. This is what this paper is about: identifying, examining, and understanding the conventions of software development culture in order to not only give dimension to this colonialist view, but also to understand how to agitate for change.
In this section, we discuss the effects of how software development biases electronic music software, and those biases then have a knock-on effect on musical outcomes. One of the biggest goals in software development is simplification. To write music software that can encompass all the instantaneous creative musical decisions within an acoustic performance, let alone the acoustic performance practices from around the entire world, would be extremely hard, complex, and costly. So to make the problems tractable, we simplify. The two examples are equal temperament and a somewhat mechanistic, strict version of 4/4 time. Now, I'm a classical and folk violinist, and I also play a lot of Balinese gamelan, so I get really annoyed by the dominance and the supposed sufficiency and ubiquity of 12-tone equal temperament. It just doesn't suit what I play. I could go on a rant well beyond the 10 minutes allowed for this whole talk, just discussing points about why I don't like equal temperament. I'll let you read the slide. Yet, when I switch to the digital domain, be it using PD, Max, Live, or even Bella, what do? I use equal temperament. Why? Because it's easy and it's well afforded. In a recent YouTube video, Autechre talked about how they make music outside of 12-tone equal temperament, and they still concluded, usually we just use equal temperament because the tools make it easy. How many times have you found yourself not even thinking about tuning systems and just defaulting to equal temperament because it's what's there? Then there's 4/4. Electronic dance music and software grown out of electronic dance music is heavily dominated by a fairly mechanistic version of 4/4, which is weird because dance music has historically not been that way. Personally, I think of waltzes, Celtic jigs, reels, and Eastern European folk dances. It's true that if you look at a score of these, they might look rhythmically simple, but it's understood that that is just an approximation of how they're actually played, with musicians interpreting those scores and adding the right spirit. So how do we teach software such complex unwritten context? I'd argue we just don't. A lot of Western rock and pop is in 4/4, and that's pretty danceable, so that's good enough, right? And hey, it suits grid-based sequencers really nicely.
Though colonial legacies certainly affect software development, there are reasons that these design decisions are made, regardless of how unhelpful they are for music making, and these reasons are tied to the software development process. The first of these reasons is design complexity. Designing software is really complex, and simplification makes the process easier or even makes it possible. Designing to optimally support one way of thinking almost always happens at the expense of another. DAWs are especially affected by this because they have to support many ways of thinking about and making music, which is in itself a complex process. In commercial software, development time equals money, and simplification means that the end product is more profitable. The second reason for these decisions is that people develop software. People are biased consciously and unconsciously, and it's easy to overemphasize your own needs as a developer or make assumptions about what's important or easy. We're also all affected by colonial legacies, and not being conscious of this or not questioning it can result in aligning with it. People who make music software are not necessarily musicians, meaning that there's not often sufficient regard for the music making process or what musicians need. Worse yet, many software developers are music hobbyists, and this knowledge can lead to thinking that if it works for me, it works for everyone, or that musical styles and genres aren't really that different from one another. Music software development lacks a culture of rigorous, wide perspective research on the people who make music. This doesn't mean great research isn't being done in industry, but there is a general lack of this kind of work in music software development culture, like there is in all areas of HCI. A third reason for this kind of decision making is inertia. For example, once software is written, it's expensive to change and companies don't want to do it. Decisions made at the very beginning have long-term effects and are expensive and difficult to undo. More than that, once workflows are established, they require effort to change, and musicians who are already being served by those workflows don't want to change the way they work. Relatedly, it's often the voices present at a software's beginning have an outsized influence on how it continues. This could be because they're perceived experts or because they're seen as representing a crucial customer group that no one wants to alienate. There's also an effect of familiarity breeding preference. For example, lots of music is made with equal temperament, and it's the norm in pop music, so it's understandable that so many people prefer it and don't want to see any alternatives.
In the last section, we discussed decisions and culture that shape software made by an individual, group, or software company. But there are also creative obstacles that are pushed by external forces within software. When we move music making onto a computer, we're making an oral experience using what is predominantly a visual medium. This is especially relevant as humans tend to privilege visual modalities. The audio visualization enabled by the computer lets us reframe how we make music in both good and bad ways. The grid is typically how we visualize and mark time in music software. It works. Without it, it'd be a lot harder to understand where things are within the time of a song. However, we often have an innate bias towards clean and precise visuals. Having a perfectly aligned version of the notes on the grid is artificially appealing, even though that decision is not actually driven by musical intention. And of course, then there's the issue of standards, the big one in music being MIDI. The problem with a standard like MIDI is that it's only actually as good as its implementation, and this will be strongly impacted by the parts of the standard that are required. Yes, MIDI as defined optionally supports interactions and tunings that are broader than just a piano and equal temperament, but being optional, support for these is pretty patchy. Yes, you can still use MIDI to support rich interaction between a specific device and a specific instrument, but it doesn't scale well when having to support many devices and many instruments. At scale, MIDI ends up pushing a reductionist keyboard and equal-tempered centric view of what music is. There's also the fact that MIDI was originated years ago when polyvoice synths were less common and data was more expensive. Even though the original intention was one channel per voice, we've somehow evolved to a place where MIDI is commonly one channel per instrument, which restricts per note messages. With all these hegemonic forces shaping our creative musical decisions, what can you do about it? We start by simply being aware and, as music technologists, challenging our own perspectives. Take some time out, even just a couple hours, to immerse yourself in learning about the sounds and performance practices in a musical genre or culture radically different from your own. Then, consider how the choices in your own work are both influenced by inertial and hegemonic forces, and how they may unconsciously align with these perspectives by prioritizing one musical practice over another. Try and design just one thing, even design fiction, with inclusivity and equality in mind. Now, share your newfound knowledge with others. Invite them to do their own design fiction or join in yours. Find where you have direct influence on musically creative outcomes, whether that being shaping industry standards, critiquing emergent DMIs, shaping commercial software, or shaping minds. Reach out, listen to, and consider relevant perspectives from practices outside your own niche. Now, this one gets a bit harder, but it's pretty common for a workplace, be it commercial or academic, to talk a good talk about things like enabling positive change or being equitable and inclusive. If you don't feel like an institution is living up to that standard, call them on it as best you can, either through papers like this, workplace discussion, or simply purchasing power. The technocultural hegemony has arrived at its current inertia because this inertia has so far been profitable. They care about the profit that they get today. Ultimately, design for creative inclusivity often benefits everyone. By advocating for the creative needs of more musicians, you can help make a better product for everybody. Technology is not neutral. Make your design decisions responsibly.